We pretend we can't hear word. Starts to whistle as he crosses the street. Now you and me in paradise. Whoa, twice. It's just another day for you. You and me in paradise. Think about it. Oh no, yeah, yeah. Oh, think about it. Yeah. She calls out to the man on it. He can see she's been crying. She's got blisters on the soles of her feet. She can't.
Good evening, everyone. May I have your attention, please? We're about to start. Welcome to the 93rd edition of the Power Dialogue, hosted by the Electricity Hub. I am Omono Okonkwo. I'd like to welcome you tonight on behalf of the Electricity Hub. So today, we're going to be discussing state electricity markets, the future of Nigeria's power sector. I'll just quickly go into it and introduce our moderator for the evening, Mr. Emeka Okpukpara, partner Next Year. Please put your hands together for him. You're welcome, sir. Up next, we have Louisa Chinedu Okeke. She's the advisor on policy and project management, Enugu State. Please put your hands together for her. Ma'am. We have Adotun Eyinade, the Program Director, Nigerian Off-Grid Market Acceleration Program. You're welcome, sir. And last but definitely not the least, Barrister Omale Omale, the Honorable Commissioner for Power, Renewable Energy and Transport, Benue State. You're welcome, sir. So we look forward to an enlightening discussion. Over to you, Emeka.
Good evening. Am I audible? Excellent. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is an honor for us to host this dialogue for the 93rd edition. Are we good? May I proceed? Excellent. So today's topic is a very interesting one for a couple of reasons. Back in 2013, the country went into the privatization of the power sector, and we ended up with 11 distribution companies, a bunch of GenCos, and a transmission company. At that moment, we were generating and we're using 4,000 megawatts with about 12,000 installed capacity. We're now 11 years later, we're still at 4,000 megawatts. And we've added a couple GenCos, but for the most part, we're still where we're coming from. So it's really important to think through these options. So the government thought that it was time to bring states into the conversation. And while there's a lot of challenges and a lot of questions on how that would work, it's high time that something else is done, because they say doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. So I'm really glad we're at a point where we want to try something new. But I think with that comes a lot of responsibility from the people on on this panel, as well as their colleagues throughout the states. So let's just get into a quick round of opening comments. Louisa, let's go ladies first and start with you. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Um, I'm happy to be here to have this discussion this evening, and I'd like to say thank you to the organizers next year for this dialogue. Um, Sometime last year, something epic was on the verge of happening in Nigeria in the Nigerian electricity market, based on the Electricity Act, the amendment to the the new Electricity Act, and then the amendment to the Constitution, which then gave powers to state to actually legislate over generation, transmission, distribution within the state and not just restricted to unserved areas. And I'm happy to be a part of this discussion. I think it all started with doing some policy work around the energy sector within Enugu State. And this journey started somewhat shortly before the current governor took office. And then it was one of the pieces of work that we started to look at when the state, when the administration effectively took place. And we've come this far. We just experienced a milestone a couple of days back when we got the order from NEC, which I'm sure we will discuss further when we get into the discussion proper. But there's still so much to do, and I believe that the Nigerian people are excited to have the regulation and the operation of the market, the electricity market, come so close to them. So I'm hopeful that with these changes in the sector that we would inch closer to energy security and energy access. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. Let's come to you, Commissioner. Just a few words to open up the conversation.
All right, let me say a very good evening to the audience in section, and to say thank you to the organizer of this dialogue. It's a way to go. I was privileged when I was approached to be around, and I receive it with excitement, knowing very well that it will afford us opportunity to deepen the conversation in the new regime that the power sector of Nigeria is headed. The conversation become very apt against the backdrop of, like Louisa rightly mentioned, what happened last year in 2023, following the amendment of the Constitution of Nigeria that took power from exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, and then allowing for states to participate in power generation, transmission, and distribution. That constitution amendment necessitates the enactment of the Electricity Act 2023. And following that, the law articulates the new regime for the power sector in Nigeria, allowing for the federal government, state, and any other prospective investors to play in the power market in Nigeria, all in a bid to bring in power or creating access to power in Nigeria in a very sustainable and affordable manner. That is coming from the background of the realization of the fact that the old order was not sustainable and realistic, and that power no longer be treated as a utility item, but as a commodity. And the unbundling for the federal government was to create more opportunities for players in the power sector without restriction. And true to it, the President, Ahmed Bola Tinubu, at the time of campaign, had stakeholders interaction where he said power must be addressed. And by every estimation, the unbundling was the first step. And he had charged the people of Nigeria that under his watch, He will grant access to power as a babe for economic spinner, and that if within 4 years that is not realized, we should reconsider his re-election. And true to type, under no time, he assent to that law and began to set out transitional programs. And it is the expression of this transition program that we saw states enacting for themselves state laws, and by the Electricity Act approaching NEC for order, to which Enugu State, Ekiti, and others are now beneficiary. That I can very well assure you, it comes with a whole lot of opportunity and a goodwill for the stabilization of, access to power and sustainable and even cleaner and better energy for the people of Nigeria. This conversation will surely give us opportunity to enjoy a better insight into where we were, where we are now, and the future of the power sector in Nigeria. I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those insights. Let's come to you, Dotun.
Yeah, thank you, Emeka. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adedotun Enyade. I work in the off-grid energy sector. I lead a program called Nigerian Off-grid Market Acceleration Program. It's funded by the Shell Foundation and FCDO. And we've been in business since 2018, so this marks our 6 years, supporting the sector, across multiple initiatives. The Chinese will say that may we live in interesting times. I think that it's especially true that we are in such times now, particularly in the Nigerian electricity supply industry, with what has happened this week, where we see the the new Electricity Act, in motion, gaining momentum and gaining traction, with the order by the electricity regulation, transferring powers to 3 states. Enugu, thankfully, we have a spokesperson, or I would say critical player in the Enugu State, government here, on the panel. Enugu State, Ekiti State, and Ondo State. So which offers, I imagine, like a template for other states to copy. So we now see that the laws, Electricity Act is now in motion, and this states, the aforementioned states have electricity regulatory bureaus. Ondo and Ekiti calls it that, regulatory bureaus, and Enugu State is Enugu State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So what that technically means in essence, just to echo the point made by fellow panelists, is that the states, now have the 3 states, among other states that have also passed the law, now have the powers to set laws that will guide the transmission, generation and distribution of electricity. And the goal is that by adopting, in a sense, what you call energy federalism, it will bring energy access closer to the people of Nigeria, right? We know that the previous Electricity Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, I think, hasn't delivered the goods. We would all agree. It led to the unbundling of the what used to be called Power Holding Company of Nigeria into GENCOs, DISCOs, and the likes, but it hasn't delivered the goods. It's just all megawatts and no megawatts, right? And it's the hope now. We're cautiously optimistic that with the new regulatory regime, more Nigerians, more people of Nigerians would have the regulator closer to them. And then it would to result into translating to more private sector investment and ultimately translating to electrons running through the wires. My own interest and interest of my organization is the folks who are currently living off grid and the folks who are currently underserved. And I do hope that and all our own interventions are geared towards ensuring that we handhold the states and such that they resist the temptation to focus on those who are currently served by the grid alone. We hope that the new regulatory regime will deliver the goods. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview. And I think it's really important to highlight that while we're in Abuja, there's 100 million Nigerians who don't have access to power. Some people say 85 million, but let's round it up and say 100 million. That's a lot of people who your organization is focused on. So thanks for the good work. Commissioner, let's come over to you. Benue State is a very unique state, and it's also a state that there's been a lot of conversations around what could happen with power, especially around agro processing and things of that nature. Could you just give us the approach the state has taken with this new act, and maybe some things you could let other states know they could start looking into as we now explore this new part of the sector?
All right, let me thank you again for this opportunity to share our thoughts on the present regime of power sector in Benue State. I own this outing completely to the benevolence and the discretion of His Excellency the Executive Governor of Benue State, himself, Reverend Dr. Hyacinth Yonyam Alia. And I must state this, that for the very first time, we now have Ministry of Power, Renewable Energy, and Transport. That is a burnout of his campaign manifesto on how to improve the power situation in Benue State, having identified that power is central to social economic transformation of every state, with greater capacity to improve on the internally generated revenue of the state, and by extension, cost improve GDP in the state that will translate to a better livelihood. And the government was coming from the background that our economic activities suffer a great setback as a result of, paucity of power supply in a manner that could not sustain industrial and economic activities. We are states that pride ourselves as the food basket of the nation, and a state that before this fourth republic enjoy a rise of cottage industries that add value to our primary agro products, but the state of power supply caused a whole lot of them to shut down and others to move out of Benue State. Hence, the need to make power a central point for the administration of His Excellency Governor Hyacinth Elia. And then true to it, as he taught it, the Nigerian concept experienced a paradigm shift from the old regime to where we currently are with the amendment of the Constitution and the enactment of the Electricity Act. Following that, it became the mandate of the ministry to coordinate the power sector in Benue State with the ultimate goal to making power available in a sustainable manner and accessible to all the people of Benue State, with the ultimate object to spin socio-economic activity that will translate in a better livelihood for the people of Benue State. With this clear mandate, our operational guideline and activity, therefore, must be situated in perspective. And that perspective now is the national policy on the power sector in Nigeria, and the position of the Electricity Act that we currently have. With that unbundling, it certainly puts on the states the what to do to making power available and accessible to the people of Benue State. And our starting point was to work closely with some technical and advisory committee on the power sector to agree on a very favorable power sector policy that will align with the thinking of the federal government, and thereafter proceed to enact the Benue State Electricity Law that will clearly give us the opportunity to design the power market in Benue State with a view of, creating access to power to our people. Currently, these are the stage that we are in Benue State, but as we make this projection, we did agree as a state that our starting point is to improve on what we currently have, which is the current power situation that is available to us in Benue State. Benue State is serviced by the Jos Electricity Distribution Company, and that company service from Gombe, Bauchi, Plateau, Nasarawa, Benue, and some part of Cross River, respectively. We set out to identify what volume of power is available to us in Benue State from this pool, and how will we ensure that this power is indeed transmitted and distributed within Benue State. That took us to conduct preliminary audit from what we had on the ground, and then engaging with strategic stakeholders in the power sector, that is with the transmission company of Nigeria, which Benue State is privileged to have a major substation, and then had an interaction with the Jos Electricity Distribution Company, in this case, the TCN and the DISCO, all to agree on making sure that what is available to us is indeed available to the people of Benue State. By the way, in that drive and in that connect, the whole essence was to jointly agree on, the power audit for us to ascertain what is the power need of Benue State. And as we speak, that interaction has caused a relatively stable and available power to the people of Benue State. The advantage that the Electricity Act also brings for us as we move from what we have to what we need. In the area of what we need would be to set up that correct policy framework and the legislative regime under which the power sector in Benue State will operate. And we take advantage of other states who have the benefit of a setup even before the enactment of the Electricity Act 2023 to do a peer review and to hold hands and leverage on their experience so that we won't miss it. But let me say this here, that following the new regime that Electricity Act threw up, the Nigerian Governors Forum brace up to the challenge and then set up for the very first time again power decks for the entire state with a view of coordinating all states to achieving power assets to their people in their respective states, and to support the capacity of state to transit. Carefully choiced consultants were put together that have also helped in fashioning a proto format of electricity law for states to adapt and then to improve upon in area of peculiarity. All this with a view of providing opportunity for us in Benue State to have a clearer perspective of where we are now, and then moving to set up the power sector in Benue State that will be attractive to investors with our core mandate of regulation. The regulation activity that will protect the interests of the investors for them to have a recoup on their investment, and to protect the interests of the consumer on the other hand, to ensure that they get value for their money. So that's the model for us in Benue State, and that's where we currently are. And we're trusting that before long, we should be able to have close up and then join the trailblazing states, Enugu, Ondo, Ekiti, and others, in properly setting up the market sector in Benue State. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very detailed explanation on where the state is. So just before I go to Dr. a quick question on your end. Has the state enacted a policy, or is that still in the works?
Yeah, as we speak, that is still in the works. And I've earlier mentioned that we have a technical and advisory committee on the power sector in Benue State that is working closely with the ministry. It drew arrays of experts and consultants, as well as professionals in the power sector from within the ministry, from the academia, and from other intervening players. All that is to have an aggregate of opinion on the best approach and perspective to setting up a power market a power market structure in Benue State that can satisfy the yearning of investors and guarantee access to power in Benue State.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's maybe take it from a global point of view, Dutton. If we look at, when we talk about Nigeria, back in the day, there was the Mint Nation, Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, and forgotten who the other one was. But if we look at Indonesia particularly, 250 million people, 80,000 megawatts of power. Nigeria, 220, 4,000 megawatts of power. But that's not the real story, right? Because we have 40 or 50,000 megawatts of power that's generated with dirty and fossil fuels, essentially. So it begs me to now think through what else can we do from the clean energy point of view. I know your organization is focused on people who don't have access. Those people are still, they might not be using these big 20, 25 kilowatt generators, but they're using the small, I better pass my neighbor generators, or they're cooking with very dirty fuel sources. Just highlight for us the work your organization is doing, and then how that really fits into this renewable energy mantra that the Act has in it.
Hello. Thank you, Emeka. Yeah, you're very correct about the energy deficits coming from the grid. How a nation of this size, depending on who you talk to, we've got about 200 million people. Some would say we are more than that, and then the installed capacity is less than 6,000 megawatts. And even those of us who are on the grid, we constantly have to contend with the reliability of the grid. I don't know how many times the grid has collapsed this year, but it's something that we have to now live with among all the lingos, associated with the power sector. It used to be up NEPA before, and now it's grid collapse, right? Now, but, the point is a lot of, Nigerians have had to augment, the reliability of, electricity with, with recourse to, self-generation, could be petrol, diesel gensets, and increasingly you find a lot of people who are adopting, standalone solar. And if you think about the fact that we have, depending on who you talk to again, about say 50% of our population or more who currently are not served by the grid. And so in relation to that, what we've sort of focused on as NOMAP, as an independent market accelerator, is to see how we can address barriers that are limiting the scale of decentralized renewables, particularly for people who are not served by the grid, right? Some weeks ago, I was in one of the states in the southeast, and we were just traveling around, and then we realized that for some of those people who are living in small towns, in villages, some of them would have access, but they would only have access for 5 hours in an entire week. Right, and there are millions of other people like that who don't have, access to, to electricity at all. So specifically, what we've done as a program is we've supported both private, market actors, with things like, market intelligence and reliable data to be able to help them identify where the customers who have the willingness and ability to pay for electricity using decentralized renewables are. So we provided a lot of work around, market data and reliable, intelligence to help them make informed decisions. We've not only supported mini-grid developers and solar home system companies, we also work with the Rural Electrification Agency, in also helping them with things like energy audits in relation to some of their programs like the Energizing Economies, and even as part of effort towards the realization of the Nigerian Electrification Program. So we've done some work around that. We also know, which I think is a problem, that is closely associated with energy deficits in this country, that the bulk of the people who do not have access to electricity, the bulk of those people are also financially excluded. So what that means is that they don't have bank accounts. And so when you then connect them to the grid, or they're connected to mini grids, or they buy solar home system, the question then arises, how do you collect money from them at scale? So we've done some interesting pilots around, working to ensure that, consumers, end users who don't have bank accounts can pay, using some interesting, fintech product. So I just, posted around what we've done on that. And I think that, just experience around what we've done is sort of fed our interest in the New Electricity Act, right? And one of the beautiful things about the New Electricity Act is, for the first time, you've got, policy statement around, things like renewable energy mix. You've got things like the 30-30-30, policy that says by year 30, we should have 30% of our, energy mix coming from, from renewables. So for the first time, you now have that backed by a law that mandates GenCos, for instance, to also ensure that they include, subject to, next mandates, to include a portion of, the electricity sources coming from renewables, so that's on one side, and also mandate distribution companies as well to also ensure that they incorporate renewable energy, into the mix. Of course, I know that will introduce new sets of, challenges around how, you want to, the stability of our grid to be able to absorb, renewable energy. But I think it's a step in the right direction, right? And we're starting to see some interesting interplay where you have, distribution companies that are already working in partnerships with, like, mini grid developers who are, working either in the interconnected, mini grid space, or just, feeding, the electricity from renewables into, directly into the grid. So I think that, it's a great time to be in the space, just looking at what is possible, and the fact that we have a law. I know there are concerns around how the laws will be implemented and how those laws will be enforced, but at least I think it's enough cause for optimism that, renewables is sort of codified into the law, and for many of the states that also have challenges around this, the old reliance on thermal, some of the states already have myriad of possibilities around, hydro. The Honorable Commissioner is from the food basket of the country. There are lots of possibilities around using biomass waste to, generate electricity. You have states like Ebonyi that has heaps of biomass, that can also be used, which is also like a renewable energy option. There are options for states that are in Niger Delta, I imagine, to also do things like wind, and of course solar, which is pretty much available all year round. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Dr. So coming over to Enugu. Enugu is a very, it's been a really good testament or case study, because it seemed like as soon as the government came into power per se, he took the power sector by the horns and really ensured that a policy was done and a bill was done thereafter. I would know because next year wrote it, so just in case anyone wants to know. But Louisa, just coming back to you, that process, what was the motivation for getting that done, and how close are distribution company, Enugu State Distribution Company?
Okay, thank you, Emeka, for this question. So you talked about the motivation. Like I said in my opening statement, that power was one of the key sectors that the administration was looking into. And if you look at several things that have been said, like policy statements, pronouncements, the state is looking deeply into increasing investment, increasing economic activity, growing the GDP. We have audacious goals. And everyone knows that a number of all these things industries, commercial activities will ride on the back of power infrastructure. So it's a no-brainer that this is one area that needs to be fixed. There's so many things. I mean, the governor was passionate about water, to deliver water. These are things too that still will ride on the power infrastructure. Currently, there's a lot being done in terms of primary healthcare centers, 260 per ward, smart schools. So I think these plethora of projects, investments, targets are the things that have, motivated this, as well as, an understanding of the issues around the power, the power sector, and just being able to understand the opportunity that the Electricity Act had provided, to us. Yes, earlier I talked about the ultimate aim is to reduce energy poverty, improve access, and we hope to see that the market, as it opens up within the state, because the state is also closer to the people, that a number of issues, and like you would know, there are layers and layers of them, would be addressed in terms of how soon will the Enugu people begin to reap the benefits. I think that this is going to be incremental, and I think with each passing day, we're closer to what that date is than today. Thank you.
Excellent. Whenever I hear incremental power, I get worried, but no worries. All right, Commissioner, back over to you. There's fears, right? Because this is a huge deal. Power is not something that is very complex. So there's fear that some of these states are not ready. They're not prepared. They can't pay pensions or salaries. How can they regulate and manage the complicated power sector? What do you say to that, sir?
Yeah, human society and human personality generally is complex, and that cannot be devoid from the situation that the power sector also brings. Power, yes, we agree, is a very technical, it's a very technical section from generation, transmission to distribution. And in that technical nature of it, also gives the opportunity to unravel and demystify, these fears and create a realistic environment for which access to power can be given expression to. I am for the school of thoughts that do not major in fears, because I agree completely that all that we fear or that we are afraid of never happens. And if we stay in our state of fear, we might not also venture into the realm of exploration and enjoy the benefit there is. I won't admit the fact that power is complex. We have the benefit to leverage on a peer review and a comparative, studies of countries or nations that are in the state of energy sufficiency. That creation is not sudden, it's not mechanical, it's from a decisive, conscious, determined, positive, and overt act. And that is what is required in the circumstance that we find ourselves. Regrettably, Nigeria, from inception to date, we're still grappling with the need to deal and address with power decisively. We knew from where we began into where we currently are. We saw the fact that our people were not committed and have the right political attitude to addressing power as a fundamental takeoff point for national transformation. We missed it. We allow greed and corruption to have a twist. Otherwise, from the conception, power was treated as a utilitarian item in the hand of the state to provide as a various product for her citizenry. That became impracticable because of the growth, and then no commensurate matchup in a consistent power sector policy and growth projection. With this unbundling, it's received with this misfeeling that you express that, oh, power is technical, it's capital intensive. How can states that do not have resources venture into this power? And I can tell that there is no perceived challenges that is not humanly surmountable. only with the right political will. The opportunity that the Electricity Act provides for the states is for them to enact their own state law, establish the state market, design the market for themselves, set up their state regulatory framework. And as they design the market, it's for them to put it in the power sector overt market for prospective investors to come. We have agreed over the time that states do not have capacity to manage business. And learning from the experience of the past, this is not inviting states to invest because they do not have, or seemingly that they do not have the capacity and resources to do. But I can tell you, once you have a very certain policy trust and legislative framework that can guarantee safety of investment, it will attract the right kind of investors to do power business in our several states. And the model for us in Benue State is to set up the market and stay in our regulatory office to ensuring that there is a safe haven for investors that will guarantee a return on their investment and will by extension provide access to power to the people of Benue State in a manner again that will protect the consumer to have value for their money at the time that we push power to become a commodity item, allowing for the laws of supply and demand to interact. So our model will be largely that of cost reflective. Once we create the environment, we tell you from the one that this is a market for you, and as you come in to operate here, it's going to be a cost reflective market that will protect your investment and protect the consumer on the other hand. And I tell you, we're besieged with fears by existing institutions that states do not have resources, they do not have capacity. And I agree with my friends who says that if there is no human entity on earth that can never be broke, is the state. The state itself is a guarantee for resources. That is on one breath. And I also agree with my friends who also say that human capacity can be created, can be hired, can be improved upon. So meaning when we say states do not have capacity, but if the capacity is not currently available to them, by policy, they can also outsource the required technical capacity to drive the power sector. So that in itself is not a fear, but like I say, once you match that situation with a decisive political will by the state, to which Benue State have, we'll create the market. And I can assure there are resources hanging across the globe that once you have that right environment and can guarantee the protection of their investment, they will come in to invest and to have a very secure investment or power sector market. All that the state need to do is to ensure that there is available market. And there is available market. That market is in the people. That market is in our agricultural endowment. That market is in the mineral resources that is also in abundance. And once power is identified as a catalyst for socioeconomic spin and is addressed, other consequential investment will begin to gravitate towards the community or the state that have stable, sustainable power supply for their industrial economic activity to thrive. So for us and for every other state, we are approaching this development from the premise that it is doable and that it is the way to go. Unbundling need to allow people to begin to play from their angle of strength, where you have comparative advantage in source of power for us in Benue State from available water resources that we have. So we can look at mini hydro power plants, or the abundance of sun that we have to explore on solar arrangement that can generate even in a very minutest form that can address underserved or strengthen the capacity of the underserved community and the unserved community. And when we start in that trickles, we generally have enough to, in aggregate, send to the grid that can sustain economic spin. So there is no fear to warrant a non-contemplation of taking steps. I will encourage any other state to look at the opportunity as against this fear phenomenon that is trailing in the power or the unbundling phase of this transition arrangement. It's a doable, and every state must grow at their pace so that in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, once we have that plan, we'll have triple what we have now to have power security in our state and in our country by extension.
Excellent. Thank you for that, sir. So, Louisa, we have a conversation that that's currently happening now with the Band 8 tariffs at 225 naira per kilowatt hour, which is 3 times the cost. So there's a perception that if states start handling power, the cost for power will be more because now there's no large customers and you're now dealing with just a couple 100,000 per state. What's the state's point of view around power? Is it a business or is it viewed as a social good?
Okay, so I can't speak for all states, but I think that Benue has already given an indication. As at the time of the design of the market, we agreed that it has to be technically and commercially viable. And that really is the way to go. So power is seen as a commodity that will be paid for. Because like I said, we're looking into attracting investments into the state, which is one of the issues we've had in the power sector. There hasn't been commensurate investment to allow for the kind of expansion that is required to deliver more energy to the end consumers. So we anticipate and we plan to have in place a market where there are eligible customers, eligible buyers, both willing to transact in the manner that businesses require, because the investors do have to get the return on their investments. So the nature of the market we've created, either in the generation end, the distribution end with electricity retail, it has to be reflective of business realities. Of course, the policy does cover the unserved and the underserved areas where, I mean, that's really an area that there is justification for government to support or to kind of intervene. And so that is also already captured in the policy, where there would be a state electrification fund to also support those services. But I think we'd also like to disabuse the thinking that, this product, power, would come in that kind of manner to, people who are served customers who are expected to pay for the service and the product. So I think in general, this is the thinking within the states, and it's the way to ensure that we have a sustainable market.
So how do you cater for the people who are off grid, who are underserved or the downtrodden in your community?
Yes. Oh, okay. So I just discussed that really. We have made provision for a state electrification fund, and I mean, depending on the needs, right now, coincidentally, we're working with NOMAP to define our off-grid policy and also the strategy and the plan, which is largely done, really. And beyond just defining that, we're also looking at areas where people can invest, either partners or investors that's the next phase that we're going into, to see what can be done within those areas in an organized manner. Okay, so looking at renewables and the kinds of sources that can work for different locations within the states, and then the kinds of mini sectors that we can target, such that when you're providing to those areas, you're also supporting their cottage industries, mini agro-processing activities and things like that. And hopefully that then fits, even to their homes and then to other services within that cluster. So this is the thinking around that, and we're going to build on that, as well as the fund that will also come on board. We also do have, as part of the market design, an electrification agency, which is going to oversee that segment of the population. So yeah, that's focused on that, but there is the real commercial, aspect of the market as well.
Interesting. Okay. So, coming over to you, Dustin, around the 4 states you currently do work in, could you highlight a bit on what that work looks like, and what are some of those outcomes as it relates to the state electricity market?
Yeah, thanks, Mega. So just something to quickly add before I jump towards responding. I think the fears that some stakeholders nurse around just the capacity of the state to be able to deliver the goods in relation to the electricity market laws are valid, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of these states are not very solvent, right? You look at the level of indebtedness of some of these states, and if you also situate that against the amount of private sector investment that they've attracted in the last years, you will see that there's a whole lot of work to be done. But be that as it may, you also need to think about, the fact that the situation seems like a chicken and egg thing, right? You need electricity to be able to catalyze a lot of, economic activities. There are a lot of, many of the states, there are a lot of like cottage industries, there are a lot of like small industries that have gone into comatose because they cannot afford, they don't have power, or they have, or the cost of power is just priced out of their reach. So that's a fear that, that needs to be really, really addressed by the states. They need to address those fears. And I don't think it's something that they need to gloss over. They need to ensure that they are not just saying, oh, the market is ready, we have the laws, but you need to actually provide comfort to investors to say, if you come in here and you invest, the whole, rhetorics around cost-reflective tariff, it won't be just give talk. It will be something that will be seen to. So those of us who are in Band A, we've had to be forced to adopt a lot of like energy efficiency, options because of the high cost of, of the tariff, and I don't think that anybody that is, raising capital from maybe foreign investors in US and coming to invest in the States in reaction to the new regulatory regime would say, I want to charge you below, what will ensure that I'm able to recoup my investment. Now, back to what we are doing with the 4 states that we're working on. So just full disclosure, we have MOUs with 4 state governments as part of, our policy and regulatory support in the aftermath of the new electricity. As we're working with the Enugu state, we have an MOU with them, and we're in advanced stages, of delivering the policy and also action plan. We have an MOU with Nasarawa state that's moving very, very well. We also committed to supporting Ondo state in southwest Nigeria, and more recently, Abia State in the southeast. So what that looks like, in practical terms, is to say, you guys already have, the states already have like electricity market laws. For some of the states already have something like Enugu, there's a law already. And the good thing is that Enugu state is blazing the trail. They not only have an electricity market law, but they also have a state electricity policy. So you have a policy that sort of says these are the policy objectives, these are the goals that we hope to achieve. And I think that one of the major points, I hope I'm not stealing the shine from you, Louisa, to talk about this. Like the state has earmarked, like by the year 2030, they're looking at achieving universal access. That's an ambitious goal. But for you to be able to achieve universal access, you need to think about those who are, also not currently served, or those who are underserved, right? So one of the things that we're currently doing with them is to take out, just a chapter in a policy that talks about, the underserved and the unserved, and then to flesh that out into a robust off-grid electrification policy that talks about things like, the enabling laws, both at the state and at the federal level, that talks about things around the governance, and accountability structure. So Louisa had earlier mentioned the fact that the state has the State Electricity Agency, that has a mandate for energy access. And I think that's really, really important for the state to be able to identify a stakeholder, a government entity that will be tasked with the mandate of ensuring that those who don't have access or are underserved, have access. Also talks about the role of the State Electricity Regulatory Agency. And then I think the other thing that we stressed in the policy that we're designing for them is just the incentives, because we understand that this is a challenge that the state alone cannot tackle. It's something that involves the participation of private companies, involves the participation of developing partners, also involves the participation or collaboration with the federal government. So what sort of incentives are you providing to all these stakeholders to ensure that you guys are, that the states and all the stakeholders are aligned and they're able to deliver on, on the electrification, targets of the state. So that's something that we are also focusing on. Then we're not just talking about electricity or electricity access alone for access sake. We are thinking of it in the terms of how can it catalyze, the delivery of other developmental outcomes like healthcare, to say you have, energy access in remote, rural communities. The electricity is also, catalyzing, or powering primary health centers, is, helping to drive the state's education targets to say we want to ensure that, kids are in school and then the schools are, are lit up. It's looking at how that can also support things like food security to ensure that, things like agro-processing is also supported by, energy. And then, that you have like clusters of agro-processing zones that are also powered by, hopefully decentralized renewables. So that's something that we're particularly focused on, and we formed a core part of the policy that we're supporting the states with, to design. And we're talking about coordination with a lot of these other functions, other MDAs, ministries of education, healthcare, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Youth, tourism and investment, particularly on the incentive side of things. And then things like how do you then monitor and evaluate progress? So apart from documenting the off-grid energy electrification policy, we're also looking at, strategy and implementation plan to say the policy is a high-level document, but how do you operationalize this from a short-term, medium, and a long-term perspective? And then you set targets to say by, hopefully when the government is up for election, these are the things that we hope to have achieved in terms of like number of schools or number of communities that are powered by, mini grids, or communities that are best served by solar home systems. So it's setting out those targets, for them. And how, in terms of methodology that we're using to deliver this, this intervention, we want to ensure that it's inclusive and it's not just NOMAP that is, sitting in Abuja and, writing up a policy and dumping it on Louisa's desk, for instance. We want to ensure that there's input and there's buy-in from, various stakeholders. So for instance, in Enugu State, we've done about 3 workshops, 2 workshops, we have like several, meetings with, a lot of the, stakeholders, just to ensure that we have their input. And one of the reasons why we've not finalized the policy up to now is that we're still expecting input from some of the MDAs to ensure that it's inclusive, right? And we've enjoyed the tremendous support of the states. The first workshop we had the SSG opening it. And I think that that's really goes to show how much of priority the state places on, energy access. And we're seeing something similar in Nasarawa State. We had the first workshop, earlier in the year, first quarter of the year. I was opened by the deputy governor. It's interesting in Nasarawa because Nasarawa doesn't have its electricity laws passed, so we're just hanging in there. And then we hope that the 2 other states were also able to, replicate the same thing. So in summary, the goal is that we want to ensure that we deliver an inclusive policy, off-grid electrification policy that is inclusive, that has the input of all the stakeholders, governments, civil society, developing partners as well. And then we also have an action plan as well that, that sort of sets what the targets are and how to achieve those targets on one side. And then beyond that, we also want to see how we can support the implementing entities to see how they can implement those plans, right? We just don't want to dump it on their desk. The first state we are supporting, we hope that afterwards we're able to do some capacity, building sessions, with them to see how they can implement this policy. I think that's all there.
Thank you for that, Dustin. Before we come to the audience for some questions, the owner of an ML350, ABJ 788 JV is blocking some people outside. So if you can please go move your car. That's an ML 350. It's parked illegally and you're blocking people. Anyways, let's get to the audience for some questions. If you've got some questions, if you have a question, raise your hand. Let's try to spend a minute or so with your questions, and so we can have time for everybody to speak. I see 4 hands, but they're all men, women. No one. Okay, yeah, excellent. So we'll do you 3 here, 1 here, and so we'll do these 5 here. So let's Blessing, let's start with the lady, and then we'll come around this way.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Christine Puri, and I'm an analyst at DevAfrique Development Advisors. My question is for the Enugu Policy Advisor. I am interested in knowing, so now that you have now a subco under Enugu's DISCO, what are some of the key lessons learned from, coming from a bigger structure that you think your subco can now will not, like, mistakes that they would avoid from coming from the mistakes that they made from like the bigger, larger DISCO. I think especially in terms of financing, with like the issues of liquidity in the entire energy value chain. What are some of the things that you think can be avoided in all of the owing between DISCOs, GENCOs, the transmissions? What are some things that you think can be changed now that you have a smaller governing structure, essentially?
Thank you. Let's go with Owaja right there. Right there.
Thank you very much. My name is Bilkadur Hassan. I work with ZH Energy Limited. My first question is on the issue of state electrification fund, which you mentioned the funds, or the fund is meant to support the sector. Is it by subsidizing the rate? Taking into account the gentleman has also spoken about the issue of those that don't have access to any financial services, and they are also maybe the question of affordability. So now, in that, maybe regarding that class of end users or consumers, how do you make sure they afford to pay? Otherwise, the investor will have some kind of challenges in deploying his resources in that particular location. Then the Honorable Commissioner also mentioned about the incentive they have in Benue State, which is quite commendable, so that we can attract a lot of investment and make the sector very attractive. But how do you also guarantee the return on investment, as you stated earlier? Do you also provide some kind of cover, like maybe partial guarantee or any of the risk management measure to attract the investors? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Let's go over here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Wajay, the Director of Blended Finance at the Greenmax Capital Group. I think the previous, shall I say, questioner has already asked part of my question. So I'll start with the first one. The Honorable Commissioner, you mentioned that there's been some audit or assessment of the demand in Benue State. I'm curious to know what that number is, because that drives, of course, what sort of rollout and technologies you'll be looking to implement. The second question is the question of around finance, right? As subnationals, I'm sure yourself, Luis, and the Honorable Commissioner, you're aware that the levers that you have are quite limited in terms of what you can bring to bear. Nationals have access to partial risk cover and political risk and all that through sovereign indemnification. So I'm curious to know, I heard this term guarantee oft mentioned. What sort of guarantee? What have you thought about the structure? What are you actually putting out there in the form of a guarantee? Is it a liquidity backstop? Is it some local partial risk cover? What sort of guarantees are you affording? Are you making available to investors to actually catalyze this investment? And I say that with understanding again that there are national risks that you would need to partner with the federal government to solve.
Thank you for that. There's 2 questions here, and then we'll come back to the stage.
Thank you. My name is Engineer Umar Modibo. I work with the government.
Which agency?
Power. So what I want to ask, maybe, I don't know, I will direct my question to Enugu. But hopefully if Benue is available, he can answer with data. I think you have explained many things without facts and figures. But my issue here is, I don't know, Enugu that has 58 days now to almost round up the market to start. You didn't talk about anything about, in 2005 when they were doing the extra, they concentrated on ATC and C losses. Without the reduction of the ATC and C losses, the firms cannot be viable. So the issue is now with this EA 2023 and handing over to the states. If you check the last report of the Federal Regulatory Commission, Enugu made a loss of 7 billion naira in 2023 second quarter. Enugu Disco made a loss of 5 billion naira in 3 months consecutively in each quarter. So how do you plan in reducing the ATC and C losses so that you can make investors understand that yes, the business is viable, then you can come and invest in your state? Thank you very much.
Thanks for that question. I've got an answer, but I'll let Louisa handle it. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Engineer Musbawa Bomusa from Kano State. So my question goes to advisor on policy to Enugu. I want to ask about do you have a specific demand for the state? Why? Because of the tariff which is going to be set by the state is depend on 2 components. One is the availability of generation, and 2 is the level of losses. You understand? And 3 also, have you do the sensitivity analysis or go-no-go analysis on issue of regulatory asset base? Why? Because of, are you using the asset owned by the discos, or are you trying to create your own network, and which is also part of the component in the tariff? And also the output of the tariff is depend on 2 things also. The higher the generation, it lead the tariff to be lower. Because of the investment, they want to recover their investment fast. That is why you need to project on how many years you are going to recover the investment. So it's based on the level of generation within the state, and also the composition of the customers based on the demand. So which is going to be very critical for the business. You understand? Like in Nigeria, on average, we are generating 4,000 megawatts. So that's why our tariff across the nation is almost 200 naira per kilowatt hour. Had it been, our generation is 40,000 megawatt, 50,000 megawatt. So at end user tariff in the country is going to be less than 60 naira per kilowatt hour. Even solar projects, that's why most of the people in settlement, their crying is very high. Why? Because the initial cost is very high. Why? Most of the developers, they want to recoup their investment within a short period of time. So what are you plan to tackle all this situation? You know, at the end of the day, I know when you simulate the tariff on Enugu State and also in Benue, the same thing is going to be above almost 1,000 naira per kilowatt. I'm sure. Why? Because of this is a fact. Because of the level of generation, the consumption pattern of Enugu and the Benue State, I don't think it's up to 100 megawatts.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah. So thank you very much.
All right. So before we come up to the panelists, Louise, I think you're a favorite. So before we come up to you to answer, let me just go through the process of how power is shared in Nigeria, right? So discos have an allotted percentage that they receive on a daily basis. The biggest is Abuja Disco, no, Ikeja Disco, right? Ikeja, then Echo, then Abuja, and Enugu Disco gets about 9% of the load that we get in the nation. Enugu Disco gets 66 megawatts on a daily. Enugu State gets 66 megawatts on a daily basis. 66 megawatts on a daily basis. For a state that's a size of how many million people? So about 4 million people or more. The point I'm making is 66 megawatts, the far cry for what the state needs. The people who are off grid on or using generators and things of that nature are paying more than the 225 naira per kilowatt hour to power their homes and businesses. The state is obviously looking at other innovative ways to get power into the state by solar and a number of other ideas. So I'm making those points to highlight that the grid is obviously not working. It's time to do something new. And it's really high time that states take this thing by themselves and start the process. So Louisa, over to you.
Thanks, Emeka. Thanks to the audience. Is keenly listening, and everyone is very curious. So I think you already provided some figures, about 69 to 70 megawatts. No, not megawatts, sorry. Yeah, it's 69 to 70, yeah, daily. We're looking at increasing this 20% year on year. And even this is not sufficient for the state. Now, there are lots of questions that are coming up. And you talked about not speaking about certain things, and that's because my answers were framed to respond to the questions that were raised. Now, starting with the one on the subco, according to the law, by the time you are ready, you set up your regulatory framework and all the other policy requirements, you notify the DISCO. So this is something I want to raise, that there is a change management process, or will I call it a transfer management process from the NEC to the State Regulatory Commission. The DISCO is supposed to, EEDC covers 5 states, of which Enugu is one. The DISCO is supposed to set up the subsidiary and advise us, as well as the BPE, NCP, with the assets and the liabilities of the subsidiary, that is the Enugu one, which of course, this then needs to be looked at to be sure that you have not unduly, applied these assets and liabilities. And so we are yet to get information on the subsidiary. So speaking about lessons, for the subcos, that will then come subsequently. So there's a whole lot of interface that needs to happen between the State Regulatory Commission and the NEC in terms of information that will be passed, the licenses, what the provisions were, the regulatory orders that had been given on in different aspects to the DISCOs, then the P&L of every DISCO, which we need to sit down and look at, the state's own ownership of assets within that as well. So these are things that need to, and also performance reports, at least over some significant period, to be able to get started. And these are things that the Regulatory Commission is already preparing for. But, an order has been given, just indicates that we have just begun the first step. So we can speak about opportunities, but in terms of lessons, that's, after the step, really. So guarantee structure, guarantees for investors. I think that question was general to everybody, but we are discussing this. This is a discussion that is ongoing. There are incentives, right, which government can provide. But in terms of guarantees, our general thinking for now is, if government is not the off-taker, you are not expecting it to provide you some kind of 100% guarantee on your transaction. Remember, and I think the Honorable Commissioner also mentioned it, the transactions should happen like commercial transactions. But in the design of our market, we have designed to have provision for a payment guarantee company, which will then come in to back actual transactions between two parties. So this is the structure that we're putting in place to be able to give some sense of confidence to the investors. But this is a market-driven entity, not necessarily a government-given entity. So what government intends to do is to provide the necessary incentives and provide confidence in terms of like the regulatory and the policy space. So that will be that on guarantee. Then in terms of all the, which Emeka did speak to some of the issues on the technical issues. So one of the things that we are doing right now is to validate some of our technical studies in terms of the load demand studies, the willingness to pay, enumerating the assets around the different boundaries and things like that. So some of the specifics I will not be able to provide to you. I know that there are concerns around, there are these subsidies that government has from the federal government have been able to provide to keep the market going, as it were, given that a lot of all these PPAs are not really, the funds are not really recouped. But these are all issues that we're looking at, and we want to, again, I want to set up a commercial market, and we actually do see it working, but we're working on those specifics to make it work in that way. Some components of some of all those things, states also has investments in them, but I don't want to go into that argument. I'm sure you know where I'm going, so that's why I don't want to go down to those specifics. Being that we are discussing this, just to let you know that it's not something we are unaware of. Yes, but I don't want to provide specifics to something that has not come out yet. Thank you for also raising that.
Thank you. Commissioner, over to you.
All right. From the very beginning, we very well appreciate that this section affords us a moment to share views and then to have a conversation that will put the power sector in Benue State and our projection for Nigeria in perspective. It is against that backdrop that, yes, on the technical issues that are raised, there are matters that are at this conceptual stage for critical studies and evaluation to understudy and be sure that the technical framework for the power sector in Benue State will align with best practice that will also engender a protection on investment and ultimately facilitate access to power in Benue State. Our starting point, like I did mention, was that audit to very well ascertain what value or volume of power do we need in Benue State for household use, for commercial use, and then to farm out the Benue electricity market in a configured manner that will be designed for the highly densely and low populated communities, and then clearly delineates the commercial hubs along the specific agricultural products that we have in Benue, from the abundance of the yam, then the concentration of a yam market for a value addition to that of orange, to tomatoes, and every other agro product that are available to us in Benue State. This model will aggregate specific and identifiable cottage industry setting for the purpose of, attracting investors to specific areas for power upgrade. And that audit is key for us, and that will also help us in designing the proper market structure in Benue State. What would we be doing to guarantee in investors. Yes. Our model in Benue State, like I have told us completely, will be that which will guarantee a technical as well as commercial safe haven for investors. And then a lesson from the past, be it in Nigeria and outside the country, have also shown clearly that the power purchase option is no longer available to the states, or it could be available to other states, but for us in Benue State, it's not a model. We create a market for willing buyer, willing seller situation. And then again, the also difficult aspect of it that deals with the off-taking arrangement. For the purpose of off-taking, you could come with a bank guarantee for investors or investment in our states. That again is not an option for us, because if we have a capacity and the technical know-how to venture into it, we will. All we simply would want to do, because of the pitfall of the past, is to create the enabling environment. That enabling environment will flow from creating the market and making space available, and then giving all the necessary enablement for power sector investor to come play. And that guarantee is to create a safe haven for investment. And that guarantee from the part of the state for initial period of investment will be for a tax holiday, tax relief, in a manner that will ensure that, yes, you have a relief or financial relief to do investment, and then settle down to begin to talk of a recoup from end to end. And then part of the guarantee will be for, you know, a regulatory standpoint for where a certain and identifiable market will be designed and identified for investors that will also broker, you know, a tripartite discussion and MOU between investors, a beneficiary community, and the state on the other end, to ensuring that the community will look at the project as their own project and ready to also put value for the product that they're expecting from this project. This, for us, is our thinking and the model that we think we not so much put burden on the state. And the market in Benue State is projectively designed in a way that will also create a relatively tax-free zone. Tax-free zone is targeted at largely underserved and unserved communities. These are similarly, what do you call it, what a market space or power market space that are similarly not viable. So how do we attract investors to this area so as to grant it access to all as far as power is concerned in Benue State? That will be closely driven by, again, the Benue State Rural Electrification Agency that we are contemplating. It will naturally also enjoy the benefit of state injunction, so as the Rural Electrification Fund that will be sourced from whatever sources of revenue or internal revenue that is available to the state for the purpose of aggregating this fund and supporting access to power to this unserved and underserved communities in Benue State. That pool of resources will also act as a buffer or a security that will attract investors to those areas that seemingly are not commercially viable in code. Beyond that, we want to largely gravitate from the old order which ultimately for every investor to be excited before now will be like, hey, give us a bank guarantee, sign a power purchase agreement with us, so that whether we, as soon as they begin to generate, whether there is a facility for transmission and distribution or not, there is a cost burden already on the state that grows the rank and further puts state in this, the position of a sovereign. We will avoid that and leave it for a willing buyer and a willing seller market.
Thank you, sir. That's very informative. Dotun, do you have anything to add?
Just thought to lend my voice to the question around some of the learning opportunities for the new subcos. You know, particularly things that can be learned from, you know, the experience with the, you know, the distribution companies for states like Enugu, where the regulators has mandated that you should, as mandated that the DISCO should set up subcos, right? And I think from the point of view of the regulator, there are actually a lot of learning opportunities are in ensuring that from the jump, things like metering is mandated 100%, right? There's a provision in the new electricity act that talks about the NEC setting up a set date through which metering would be metering would be mainstream and massively adopted. And I think that the opportunities for the state electricity regulatory bureaus or commission to ensure that when the SEPCOs are going into operation, that they mandate metering. How realistic that is, it's in the lap of the gods, as I say. But I think it's something that they can potentially look at. So that's one. I think another opportunity will be around something also mentioned in the new electricity act, which is the criminalization of electricity theft. It's sort of very pervasive now for households, for companies to bypass meters, to tamper with meters, as well. So I think that the regulatory agencies can actually ensure that they also have laws that will criminalize and ensure that there are stiff penalties associated with electricity theft or bypassing meters. I think that that's something that the opportunities for the state electricity board to implement now that they have the powers to do that. And then just something around the rural education fund. It's something that really excites stakeholders like us, that the laws, most of the states are adopting laws that ensure the setting up of rural education fund, which supports imagine private sectors, and then to ensure that access can come to those who are not served and those who are not underserved. And I imagine that at the federal level, the rural education fund can also continue to complement the effort of state rural education funds. And now that you have state regulatory agencies, they can draw the sources of funds for the rural education fund to include things like fines and penalties to to market actors, and ultimately that can go towards ensuring that those who are not served or those who are not underserved, access can be subsidized for them. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Dotun. And just before I come back to the audience, so one last round of questions. I think one thing that's very clear around lessons learned are the regulator and the sector must work together. There's no island of this is one part of the sector, it's another part of the sector. Everyone must be in that's why it's called a value chain. You have to have data and it has to be transparent. It can't be, I'll give this data to this person, and then when you ask the same DISCO for the same data, you get a different result. So the states, as you guys start this journey, it's critical that you ensure that transparency, because capital doesn't like risk. The power sector has brought down a couple structures, including a bank, right? So it's critical that as you begin this journey, it doesn't become I like you, I don't like you, or we're political friends. That's nonsense. You've got to get power to your people. And the way you do that is by running a transparent sector. All right, audience, we've got time for maybe 3 more questions. My friend from Ghana, David, Emmanuel, and I guess Dozier. He's coming for you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Omata, and I work as Technical Associate with Nextia. Honorable Commissioner, my first question goes to you. You've talked a lot about all the things you have in process. Your state policy is still at the draft stage. Now, by the end of your first tenure, what do you project to be the electricity access in terms of percentage in Benue State? And to the policy advisor, now you talked about your retail market. From the little I know in the retail market, the end users have the opportunity to port the electricity that they get. So it's just like the telecom. So if I want to switch, I can switch. And I think this makes room in the developed countries. So they have this already functioning. But since you talked about it, I want to know, is this the model that you want to adopt or you have adopted already in Enugu State, where end users can port if a particular supplier, maybe the tariff is too high, or they are paying without getting the desired service? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Emmanuel.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Mine is not a question. It's basically like a comment and an advice to the panelists. So for one thing, I need us to understand is if you look at the national grid as it stands today, there are hubs that are relatively commercially more viable than other hubs. And if you look at EEDC's business as it stands today, Anambra takes about 3% of the energy from the grid. Enugu does about 2.3% from the grid. So, and if you look at the efficiency of the DISCO, you see that Anambra is also doing relatively better in terms of an ROI than Enugu DISCO. So, and if you come to Benue, I'm not so familiar with the numbers from the Benue, but I also know that Benue may not be doing as much as what Enugu State is doing. Now, my point is, I think while we're all excited about the opportunity to design our market and all of that, we should look at it from the context of creating a platform that will serve like an incentive to investors to come in. You and I know that if an investor is coming $200 million to Nigeria to invest in energy and get his return guaranteed and all of that, we're looking at the likes of Lagos State, Ogun State, FCT, and a couple of other places where it can quickly ramp up its numbers and go back to where it's coming from. And so coming from that context, I would suggest that whichever model we are trying to put together should be a loss-based incentive model. Like if you take a Benin, for instance, emphasis should be on define it. I'm glad you say you are doing a study, right? That is how to be holistic, be very, very transparent, like Emeka suggested, but try to use Makurdi as a pilot to attract, to pass your message out to the investors. Whatever you put together in Makurdi can incentivize people to think about Boko, Otukpo, and other clusters. So that is what I'm trying to put together. Whether it is on the financial context, on the technical or commercial context, but Makurdi should be your selling point for others to be able to get access to your cluster. So that's basically my suggestion to Benue. As for Enugu State, I'm personally happy that, looking at my connection with the state, I'm happy that Enugu State has took the courage to be the first mover on the market, though Ekiti has also joined. What I would suggest to you in Enugu State is create a market that can also have an opportunity to be able to import energy from outside of the state. What I mean by that is if it means to be some form of a connection with the national level, NEC, wherein you can have arrangement with the guys in Imo or in Rivers State where they have abundant reserves of gas. That way you have an agreement wherein they can port in energy as a very cost-efficient process to you. That way you can quickly close the gap between the 90, because I think the 60 to 90 megawatt are taking currently to almost about 150 megawatts within the next 6 months or 1 year. That would be what I would suggest to Enugu State. And I know that Enugu State as it stands today, Unite My Corner, the university environment around Nsukka are viable areas where you can quickly put in money and you get value immediately. So basically my suggestion is, irrespective of the model you're trying to put together, let it be a loss-based incentive, loss-incentive-based model that can attract and give confidence to your investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. There's one behind you, Dozier. Yeah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nadozie Wonha from EMRC. Sorry to drag us back. Actually, I'm not sorry, but I think there's some important questions we need to answer. Being that we have, how do I put it? I acknowledge that everything is still very preliminary, but the good thing that we have here is that we have the experience of lessons learned. That is from NERC being a regulator way back mid-2000s thereabouts. So my first question actually goes to tariffs. So, and I think this would be to Enugu State, being that you're the leading state regulatory body. What is your thought process around the tariff methodology going forward? Do you intend to continue the current tariff structure of service-based tariff? And I ask this because if we look at the performance of the service-based mechanism in the last 4 years, it hasn't exactly been great. It hasn't really solved a lot of problems. So do you intend to maintain that tariff structure? And if you don't intend to maintain it, what exactly do you have in mind in terms of going forward? Are you carrying out any sort of cost of service studies to actually determine the true cost of serving the customers within that franchise state? That's another question. And then also going to, in terms of the lessons learned from Enugu State, the 70 megawatts that you says is the average demand gotten by Enugu State. I know we've made statements saying it's not enough, we need to ramp that up. What has been the performance of the DISCO over the past couple of years in terms of purchasing that power, delivering that power, and being able to pay for that power? Because we shouldn't just be looking to ramp up 70 megawatts to 140 megawatts when there's no clear, mechanisms or ways in which we can actually receive and pay for that power. And in my last decade of supporting DISCOs, I know we're now at the point where DISCOs are trying to pivot to say, hey, look, I can't actually take 70 megawatts. Maybe what I could take and pay for is 50 megawatts. So how do you intend to step into either, using renewable energy initiatives to kind of close that gap? And the last one, which really, really focuses on the lessons learned, is the metering initiatives. There was a comment saying how we need to give some sort of hard deadline in terms of closing out the metering gap. I mean, we've been, this is where now, fourth metering initiative or fifth? I think we have CAPME, MAP, NNMP. Currently, there's a presidential metering initiative. It really doesn't fall from the sky. So what is Enugu's, strategy in terms of closing that gap? And I'm asking this not just, I'm expecting that being that Enugu has taken that lead, Enugu has certain plans to, implement key innovative strategies for metering. It hasn't worked so far. It's honestly not as easy as just saying I'm giving a hard deadline where you have to close out 100%. That's really not how it works. It takes money to buy those meters. So what is Enugu thinking about? Are you thinking about bulk metering? Are you thinking about coming up with lowering the metering specifications just to at least be able to read? I believe there's so many other new innovative models that are out there to kind of help close that gap in a shorter time and cheaper. So I think maybe just to recap, metering, what are your thought processes? The demand, has there been a demand study carried out to actually determine what Enugu requires? And just to add something there, when there was some analysis carried out a couple years back on the SBT, that's the service-based tariff, Enugu moved its higher tariff to the residential customers and moved it away from, its maximum demand customers. That's the commercial and industrial customers. Why did they do this? Because their basically customer mix was predominantly residential. So it made no sense for them to charge more to people who were using less. So what is the thought process around that when it comes to that demand? And also going back to the tariff, SBT, it's fine, but it hasn't worked. So what is Enugu thinking about? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dozier. And there's some comments online. So let me get to those. So the first is around, okay. They're quite similar to what's in the audience. So let me ask, I saw one more hand up, two more hands up, one, and then my friend in the back. All right, let's get to those.
All right, good evening, everyone. So I have a question, and this question is going to the Honorable Commissioner as well as to our Enugu panelists over here. So my question is going to be not really a question; it's going to be like a comment, observation, and to go forward, I will have to recall an interview I actually watched, and that was an interview involving Prince Malik Ado Ibrahim, and it was trying to, it was actually discussing about how one of the largest renewable energy distribution, not renewable, one of the largest renewable energy dairy factory in Anambra State came to be, which is Sebero Farm. You understand? So from the interview, there was a takeout of it, and that was that Sebero Farm actually generated about 8 megawatts of power, not just power to actually sustain its own self, but power to actually, enough power that they can actually distribute to the local populace around the state in Anambra, and they are doing that at a subsidized cost. So when I read further through the story of Sebere Farm, how they came to set up that project, how they came to set up that renewable dairy factory that generates about 8 megawatts of power, it happens to be that there were a lot of challenges before they could actually set up that structure. And one of the challenges has to do with actually the finance side of things. Now, where am I heading to? The thing is that, like the Honorable Commissioner has mentioned before, this kind of projects are very capital intensive, you understand? So I don't think, having just the tax incentives and other kind of incentives are just alone to actually incentivize investors to actually come into these sectors, to be players, to come and make investments, you understand? So that is where I'm pointing out this recommendation, because over the time I've worked with some mini grid developers who actually want to go into this, mini grid projects, actually be part of this energy sector, not just because they just want to cash out, but just because they're also passionate, trying to actually help sustain that, what's it called, the US Sustainable Development Goal. So one of the things I actually learned was that most of those people, they actually go to Bank of Industry, to seek for grants to actually go into this project, because like the Honorable Commissioner has mentioned, it's a very large capital intensive project. So you've actually mentioned a very good point there for Benue State, saying that you're actually planning to put out a fund that will actually, cater to this and this, but this is where the recommendation or the advice now coming from it. So all I'm trying to say is that in addition to having these incentives and everything in place to actually, stimulate investors' interest into that sector, it might actually be wise to, have the fund, have a portion of that fund goes into grants, you understand, like an added support to investors who want to come into the sector to play, because it's a very large sector that requires a lot of capital.
Land on your question. Let's land on your question.
So that is not, no, it's not really a question, it's an advice.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take one last one behind, and then we'll come up for the closing.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Mine is a question. Sorry, mine is a comment. The moderator, when you started, you said we have about 4,000 megawatts on the grids right now, out of about 12,000 megawatts power plants available. For Enugu and Benue, just to let you know that the numbers out there, licenses that have been issued by NEC, suggest that there are projects of about 43,000 megawatts already in the works. So please, as you grow in the states, let your first step not be that of generation, renewable, and all the rest. Get information already available about projects and licenses, about potentials that already exists. If, for example, Enugu is getting actually having the 12,000 megawatts available to even get to 200 megawatts, that will be your share out of the 12,000 megawatts space. So renewable might be expensive, mini grid might be expensive, but please look at what already exists and grow from there. In the short run and in the medium term, look for other creative alternatives to grow. That would be my comment. Thank you very much. John Kadiri, Alpha Masva.
Thank you, sir. So, Louisa and the commissioner, let's start with you, keeping in mind that we've got about 8 to 10 minutes to wrap up. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I see there are lots of interest in what we're doing, and people want to. It's an exciting new journey, and people really want a lot of tangibles, and hopefully in a couple of weeks we should have that, because like you see from the order, we do have a timeline to set this in place. What the order does is that it opens now the conversation to be able to get some of the information that we really need. So some questions are related to operations of the EEDC, which now, based on the order, I mean, we had started to engage with them. We've had maybe 2-3 meetings, but now based on the order, I mean, we'll be able to have tangibles. But I can give you some indications because we have our regulatory commission and we've been discussing, you know, some of all these issues. So in terms of tariffs, it appears that a cost of service, you know, like review will be done to look at all the different layers, knowing, I mean, we've been in the sector, knowing some of the things that could be embedded in there. So that's a process that we also intend to undertake. But at the end of the day, if we're going service-based model or not, I can't, you know, categorically now put that before you, but there is a plan to review every component, okay, of the cost. And then metering being an issue and performance of the DISCO. So like I said, performance reports are also some of the things that we intend to get from the NEC. Thank you to the last gentleman that spoke as well. Even information related to all licensees within the states, that's also information that we intend to request. But just even being within the state, we do know that metering is an issue. And this is also an issue that we have been discussing. While as a government, we don't want to treat power as something that needs to be possibilities that meet that, but the structure in which it would take is something that we're still discussing. Is it government to match certain funds that the DISCO is going to put down for metering and the regulator enforcing that this is done? You know, these are discussions we're also having. I hope that the gentleman that asked the question is listening and somewhat satisfied with the response. Then in terms of porting for retailing as is done for the telecom sector, I was slightly involved in that porting, you know, for the telecom sector. That's quite futuristic. Eh? It's a good to have. But one of the plans that we have is to have electricity retail companies, which, you know, even with the electricity retail companies, some of the things we are reviewing is what format are we going to have retail companies cover jurisdiction, and will that be hard stopped, or will we allow, you know, some overlap? Will it be exclusive, or are we also, because then you have people cherry picking? So people will want UNN, you know, the Suka axis. People will want, you know, the 9th mile axis where you have commercial and industrial customers. So would there also be a model where you are assigned supposedly what do you call it? Profitable, yeah, I don't want to use colloquial, viable area, and you are also matched with one non-viable area to just ensure that commitment to access. So again, like I said, until our regulations, our licensing requirements and all those things are finalized and put up out there, and the public is invited to then comment on them, I can only give you indications of our thought process, which is what I've done, and I hope that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. Commissioners, come to you for a couple minutes response. Over to you.
All right. Let me thank us once again for the continuous interaction that this opportunity offers. Like we say, it's give us opportunity to speak on our thought pattern as far as establishing the power market in Benue State is concerned, and then to also leverage on experience that we share on this interactive table. Understanding the power sector in Nigeria and in Benue State in particular is directed at providing the best option or model that will suit and ultimately address the power gap and creating access to power to the people of Benue State. And the whole gamut of that is to do a critical analysis of the situation as it were and as it is, and then the projection we can make therefrom. These are conscious efforts from the side of the Benue State government to ensuring that we come out with the best possible model that will be a showcase for others in the country. Yes, I began by telling us that our starting point is from what is available, the system, the structure, the infrastructure that are currently available to us. And like rightly mentioned here, whether what is allocated to Benue State truly gets to Benue, and the people of Benue State are getting value for what the distribution company currently allocates to Benue State. And to doing that and to also maximize the power space in Benue State is, I mean, closely linked to the question on metering. It's our decisive effort and initiative to ensure that from the regulatory regime, metering, the widening gap of metering in Benue State is bridged up. Benue State is one of the rare states in Nigeria that parades 3 divisions of the JETCO, Makurdi, Otukpo, and Boko, respectively, for strategic reasons. And that actually captured the market configuration that exists in Benue State already. But that notwithstanding, we are still recording a very wide gap in metering. And until that is done, you cannot ascertain, the value for power that is available in the market space in Benue State. So starting from where we are, is our commitment as a government to come out with a workable agreement with the Jos Electricity Distribution Company on how to bridge up this meter gap because of our obligation to the people of Benue State and the security we intend to provide for investors in the Benue market sector. Working in our mind is to, at the close of that audit, to also know how many of the household or how many of the service points in Benue that are not covered by the meter initiative by the government at several times, and how can the state come in. And the state will come in with a model that will also put us in an investment position for a jumpstart, for us to also set a template for our projected power market in Benue State. And like I kept saying, our model in Benue is end-to-end, all right, with every prospective investor allowing for a hybrid at another breadth. The end-to-end will simply mean that for the underserved, unserved communities or targeted cluster markets that we currently have will be for generation, transmission to distribution. And in this value chain, the whole of this value chain will be very neatly knit up in our power generation, transmission, distribution agreement to cover that, yes, as you have a license to operate in our market space from generation to your distribution, the distribution end will be tied and wrapped up in metering, ensuring that every access to power is metered so that we can ascertain what gets to us and ascertain the value, the volume of power that is available to the state for us to be able to make a reasonable projection into addressing the power gap that we need to truly spin social economic activities in Benue State. So starting from where we are into where we intend to take Benue State to is an end-to-end arrangement, meaning the GENCO must align with the thinking of the state to ensuring that every access point is metered. Whatever model we can come up with to achieving that will be worked out in the course of time. And then as we move to open up the market space for every investor, it will be an end-to-end. So meaning if you are generating, transmitting, and distributing this meter, we know what you are generating, and we know what ultimately you are also distributing. And then if you are going to generate and then have a franchise agreement with the distribution company, then you know what you are also sending to their grid for the purpose of distribution, and they know that that arrangement ordinarily will also cover the metering end for the access point, and then Benway will be good for it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, Dutton, let's come to you for your closing remarks. You've got a minute.
That there's a lot of interest, like strong interest in what the states are up to, and for the states that are taking the lead, all eyes are on them to see what they're able to come up with and how they're able to deliver results quickly. So people are impatient. They are, rightly so, they're impatient for electricity, and then they want results. So just one thing to quickly add, I think, again, to reinforce the point that you made about the need for transparency, now that the states are, we've adopted energy federalism. I think it's important for the state, as they enact these market laws, to also ensure that the laws are in the public space, right, and they're accessible to everyone. I struggle that for states like Plateau, that is said to have passed electricity, market laws. There is I can't find that law out there, and then I can mention a couple of other states too that that are in that same bucket. So it's important to ensure that there's transparency, and one of the first steps to achieving that is to ensure that once the laws are passed, they are out there in the public domain, that every other person to be in the sector, the opportunities for everyone from
Thank you, Dutton. Louisa, before you go,
the issue, the problem where we are today. There's also the commercial aspects, which people are asking about, guarantees and all of that. There's also the capacity building element to it for all the institutions, the players that are within the sector. And what I just say is that we're all gonna have to learn as we go. You said it's a race. I'm not sure it's a race to the finish. I think that our people say that when you're it's good morning when your day has broken, something like that. So I think for every state, it's going to happen at different points in time. And being one of the first states to, embark on this, we would be leveraging from so many people out there, some of the people that Dr. has talked about, all the support that is available to leverage and then learn as we go ahead. But I think we all need to be positive about it. The change has come, it's here, and we just need to, take the bull by the horn, and hopefully we'll be saying cheers in a couple of dialogue sessions. But just to come back to the question on investors, yes, the state has been speaking to investors, I think pretty much from last year when, we started. It was obvious that there's some activities. And of course, we expect that the influx will be more even now. And in terms of a summit, yes, this is something we were, even discussing as at today. But we'll keep you posted.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Sir, your closing remark, and we've got a minute because we have to finish by 8.
Yes. For us from Benue State is to bring the assurance of the Benue State government to prospective investors and then the entire community of Benue State that we are committed to facilitating access to power, sustainable and in a very cleaner form to the good people of Benue State, and then to also open up the Benue power market in a manner that will ensure protection and safety on investment, and will guarantee a return, and will also secure the consumers' interest at the other end. We are moving at a pace that we're currently moving. We are certainly leveraging on the giant stride that was caused by other states, and then we are taking advantage of the power decks that the Nigerian Governors Forum provide with the technical and consultant services to ensure that the policy as well as the legislative framework for the Benue power sector comes out in a manner that will be enduring and guarantee access to power in Benue State.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so just a quick point for some takeaways. So as states begin this journey, there's a few things that I think are very important to note. There should be a pathway for revenue assurance. It should be transparent. And last but not least, you should obviously do your data verification. That's a given. But last but not least is technology. Technology is very important as you figure out these issues. Revenue assurance, you need meters to be able to get this done, as far as being able to have a holistic sector that has a willing buyer and a willing seller. A quick story as we end. There's a company called Steamaco. Steamaco is an IoT firm from the UK. They came down about a year ago and did a pilot in Ogidi, where they were able to take over a cluster feeder farm in Enugu. They were able to do this pilot with smart meters and their AMR system, and they were able to reduce losses and bring collections to 98%. Those are the type of figures states need to start looking into, because you cannot run a system where I heard today one of the states in the AADC network has losses of 80%. How do you run a business when you lose 80% of your revenue? It is impossible and it's impractical. So states, as you begin the journey, good luck, and we're here to support. Just as a note, the Next Year and Executive team wrote the energy policy for Enugu, and we're doing the ones for Anambra State as we speak. And we're very interested in growing this market, because we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again. Thank you again. And let me hand over to Busayo for the closing. Busayo.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you sharing your time with us. And to our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We are very happy you were able to shed light to certain uncertainties about the operationalization of state electricity market with Nigeria's current state, and we are really grateful for that. To our guests, please do not drive in the rain. We really want to see your faces next month. So I advise you use this opportunity to share ideas, to talk more about the state market, to see how you could contribute, how I could contribute, how we could do things basically. And there are refreshments at the back. So just enjoy yourself. Thank you once again. Good night, everyone.